Dr. Jake Harrison pushed his worn baseball cap back and wiped the sweat that had been dripping into his eyes for the past hour. The twin suns of Kepler 442b were setting behind the jagged mountain range, casting long purple shadows across the excavation site. He had been working alone on this dig for 3 months now. The isolation was beginning to wear on him more than he cared to admit. The crystalline figure before him was unlike anything he had ever encountered in his 15 years as a Zen archaeologist. Standing 7 feet tall, it appeared to be carved from a single piece of living crystal that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. The material was completely transparent in some places, while other sections glowed with a soft blue radiance that shifted and moved like captured starlight. Jake set down his delicate brushes and stepped back to admire his work. The alien statue depicted a feminine figure with impossibly graceful proportions. Her face was serene and beautiful, with high cheekbones and full lips that seemed almost human. But there were subtle differences that marked her as distinctly otherworldly. Her eyes were larger than any human's, and her ears came to slight points. Her hair appeared to flow like liquid mercury. Frozen in time mid-motion, the being wore flowing robes that seemed to billow in an unfelt wind, and her arms were raised slightly as if she had been reaching for something just before being turned to crystal. Around her neck hung an intricate pendant that Jake had been studying for weeks, unable to decipher its meaning or purpose. "Beautiful," Jake said aloud, his voice echoing strangely in the empty ruins around him. "Looks like it's just you, and me again tonight." He had started talking to the statue weeks ago when the silence became too overwhelming. His research team was supposed to have arrived by now, but funding delays and bureaucratic red tape had pushed back their arrival date by another 2 weeks. Jake had volunteered to stay behind and continue the initial excavation work, thinking the solitude would help him focus. Instead, he found himself growing increasingly lonely and talking to inanimate objects just to hear a voice, even if it was his own. The ruins surrounding the statue were clearly ancient, predating human presence in this system by thousands of years. The architecture was elegant and flowing, with curved walls and arched doorways that seemed to have been grown rather than built. Strange symbols covered many of the surfaces, but Jake had been unable to translate them despite running them through every xenolinguistic database available to human science. As darkness fell across the dig site, Jake began packing his tools into their protective cases. His portable generator hummed softly in the background, providing power for his work lights and his small living habitat nearby. The nights on Kepler 442b were long and cold, and Jake had learned to finish his work before the temperature dropped too dramatically. "You know," he said to the statue as he sealed his equipment containers, "I've been thinking about what you might have been like when you were alive. If you were ever alive, that is." Jake had developed elaborate fantasies about the crystalline being during his long, solitary evenings. He imagined her as a princess or perhaps a priestess of some ancient alien civilization. Maybe she had been a scientist like himself, studying the mysteries of the universe. Or perhaps she had been an artist, creating beautiful works that had long since crumbled to dust. The loneliness was getting to him more than he wanted to admit. His failed marriage back on Earth still stung, even 2 years later. Dr. Rebecca Martinez had been his research partner as well as his wife, but their relationship had fallen apart when their careers began pulling them in different directions. She had chosen a prestigious position at the Mars Colonial University, while Jake had accepted this frontier assignment hoping to make the kind of discovery that would establish his reputation as a serious scientist. Tonight, the isolation felt particularly heavy. Jake retrieved his field kit from his habitat and pulled out a small bottle of synthetic whiskey. The alcohol was technically against regulations for solo fieldwork, but Jake figured no one would complain as long as he continued making progress. On the excavation, he took a long sip and felt the artificial warmth spread through his chest. Walking back to the statue, Jake studied her beautiful features in the work lights. The way the illumination played across her crystalline skin made her seem almost alive, as if she might open her eyes at any moment and speak to him. "You're probably the most beautiful woman I've talked to in months," Jake said with a rueful laugh, the whiskey making him more talkative than usual. "Hell, maybe years." Rebecca was gorgeous, don't get me wrong, but she never looked at me the way you do. Of course, you don't actually look at me at all, but still. He took another sip from the bottle and found himself standing closer to the statue than he had ever dared before. Her face was level with his now that he was standing on the raised platform. Where she had been discovered, her crystal lips were parted slightly, as if she had been about to speak when whatever force had transformed her had taken hold. "I bet you were amazing," Jake whispered, his voice barely audible over the humming generator. "I bet you had stories to tell that would blow my mind. Adventures across the galaxy, knowledge of things humans haven't even dreamed of yet." The whiskey and the loneliness combined to make Jake feel bold in a way he hadn't felt in years. Was this beautiful, mysterious being who had become his only companion during these long months of solitude? She had listened to all his stories without judgment, heard his dreams and fears without criticism. On impulse, fueled by synthetic alcohol and genuine affection for his silent companion, Jake leaned forward. His heart was beating faster as he approached her perfect crystal face. Without fully thinking about what he was doing, he pressed his lips gently against her smooth forehead in a tender, almost reverent kiss. The moment his lips made contact with the crystal surface, the world around him erupted in brilliant white light. Jake felt electricity coursing through his body, not painful, but overwhelming in its intensity. The light was so bright he had to squeeze his eyes shut. But even through his closed eyelids, the radiance was blinding. Then, possibly, ancient eyes that held the depth of starlight itself snapped open. The crystalline being's lips moved, and a voice that sounded like wind rushing through cosmic dust filled not his ears but his mind directly. "Your species is doomed to repeat the cycle of the devourers, just as we were." Jake stumbled backward, his heart hammering against his ribs so hard he thought it might burst. The bottle of whiskey slipped from his nerveless fingers and shattered on the rocky ground. The statue was no longer a statue. The being before him was alive, aware, and looking directly at him with eyes that had seen the birth and death of civilizations. Jake's legs trembled as he stared at the crystalline being whose eyes now blazed with ancient intelligence. His rational mind screamed that this was impossible, that statues did not come to life, that aliens did not speak directly into human thoughts. Yet here she was, looking at him with eyes that seemed to hold the memories of entire civilizations. "Please," the voice whispered inside his head, gentle but commanding, "do not run away from me. I understand your fear, but I mean you no harm." Jake's mouth opened and closed several times before any sound came out. When he finally managed to speak, his voice cracked like a teenager's. "This cannot be real. You are made of crystal. You are an artifact, a piece of history that I dug up from the ground." The being's lips curved into what might have been a smile, though her crystal features made it difficult to tell. Her entire form seemed to be becoming more alive with each passing moment. The blue glow that had been trapped within her transparent skin was now flowing freely, creating patterns of light that danced across her surface like aurora in a night sky. "My name is Lyra," she said, and Jake felt the name resonate in his mind like a musical note. "I am the last surviving member of a race you might call the Architects. Your simple gesture of affection has broken the preservation spell that has kept me in crystal sleep for over 1,000 of your Earth years." Jake rubbed his eyes hard, wondering if the synthetic whiskey had been stronger than he thought. "Architects? I have never heard of any alien race called Architects. That is, because we have been gone from this galaxy for longer than your species has existed," Lyra explained. Her voice in his mind was growing stronger and clearer. "We were ancient when your sun was still a young star. We built great cities on worlds throughout this region of space, including this one that you now explore." The archaeologist in Jake began to overcome his shock and fear. If this being was telling the truth, she represented the greatest discovery in human history. "You've built these ruins? This entire complex?" "This world was one of our research stations," Lyra confirmed. "We called it Haven's Rest. It was a peaceful place where our greatest minds came to study the patterns of life. Throughout the galaxy, we were gardeners of sorts, helping young civilizations grow and develop, protecting them from dangers they could not yet understand." Jake looked around at the curved walls and flowing architecture that surrounded them. Everything suddenly made more sense. The organic shapes, the way the buildings seemed to grow from the rock itself, the advanced materials that had survived thousands of years without showing signs of wear. "What happened to your people?" Jake asked, though part of him dreaded the answer. Lyra's luminous features darkened, and the light patterns flowing across her skin slowed and dimmed. "The Devourers came to our galaxy." They always come, Jake Harrison. "Every few million years, when advanced life has had time to flourish and grow, they emerge from the dark spaces between galaxies, like a plague of locusts. Devourers." Word sent a chill down Jake's spine. "Creatures of hunger and emptiness," Lyra continued. "They consume not just life, but the very essence of civilization itself. They feed on knowledge, on culture, on all the beautiful things that thinking beings create. They strip worlds bare and leave nothing but empty husks floating in space." Jake sank slowly to his knees on the rocky ground, overwhelmed by the implications of what he was hearing. "How many civilizations have they destroyed?" "Thousands, perhaps. Tens of thousands. They have been doing this since before your galaxy was fully formed. The Zephyrians, who built cities of pure sound, the Crystal Collective, who lived as beings of living light, the Iron Dynasty, whose ships could travel between dimensions, all gone, all consumed, and your people fought them." Lyra nodded, a gesture so human it was startling coming from her crystalline features. "We fought them for 10,000 years. We had advantages that other species lacked. Our technology was more advanced, our understanding of the universe deeper. We thought we could break the cycle that had destroyed so many others." "But you lost," Jake said quietly. "Yes, in the end, even we could not stand against their hunger. We did not go quietly into the darkness. Before our final cities fell, we scattered warnings throughout the galaxy. We hid weapons and knowledge. In places where future civilizations might find them, we prepared for the day when others would face what we had faced." Jake's scientific mind was racing, trying to process everything he was hearing. "Why are you telling me this? Why now?" Lyra's eyes focused on him with an intensity that made him feel as though she could see straight into his soul. "Because they are coming again, Jake Harrison. The Devourers have sensed the rapid growth of your human civilization, and they stir. In their long sleep between the galaxies." "How rapid?" Jake asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Your species has advanced technologically faster than any we ever observed," Lyra explained. "Most races take millions of years to progress from simple tools to space travel. Humans accomplish this in mere thousands of years. This acceleration has created ripples in the cosmic order that the Devourers can sense across impossible distances." Jake felt a cold dread settling in his stomach. "How long do we have?" "Perhaps 50% of your years," Lyra said, her mental voice heavy with sorrow. "Maybe less if your technological growth continues to accelerate. They will come to your galaxy like they came to ours, and they will consume everything your species has built." "Surely we can fight them," Jake protested. "Humanity has survived wars, plagues, natural disasters. We are tough. We adapt." Lyra's form flickered, becoming more transparent. Jake could see that maintaining consciousness was requiring tremendous effort from her. "That is why I have hope for your people, Jake Harrison. There is something different about humans. Architects never possessed." "What do you mean?" But even as Jake asked the question, he could see that Lyra was fading. The light patterns on her skin were slowing, and her eyes were beginning to lose their focus. "I cannot maintain this awakened state for much longer," she whispered in his mind. "The crystal sleep calls me back. But Jake Harrison, you must listen carefully to what I tell you now." Jake leaned forward, desperate not to miss a single word. "Find the other sites," Lyra said, her voice growing fainter. "We left markers throughout human space, hidden where your explorers would eventually discover them. Learn what we have left behind. Study our weapons, our knowledge, our final preparations. How will I know where to look?" The pendant around my neck contains star maps. But Jake Harrison, be careful how you share this knowledge. Every species that learned of the Devourers too early either fell into despair or destroyed themselves in panic. You must prepare your people carefully, gradually, without destroying their hope. Lyra's eyes were closing now, the crystal returning to its dormant state. But her final words burned themselves into Jake's memory. Find the others who can handle the truth. Build in secret. And remember, Jake Harrison, that sometimes the greatest strength comes from what others see as weakness. The last of the light faded from her crystalline form, and once again, she appeared to be nothing more than a beautiful statue. But Jake knew that everything had changed, was no longer just an archaeologist on a routine dig. He was humanity's first line of defense against a threat beyond imagination. 3 years had crawled by since that night when Jake first kissed the crystal statue and changed the course of human history forever. Those years had been filled with careful planning, secret missions, and discoveries that would have shocked the entire scientific community if they had been made public. Jake had aged beyond his years, the weight of humanity's future pressing down on his shoulders like a physical burden. The hidden laboratory beneath the University of New Geneva buzzed with quiet activity. Jake had chosen this location carefully, far from the major spaceports and military installations that might attract unwanted attention. The facility was officially registered as a xenorchaeology research center, which gave him perfect cover for the work he was really doing. Dr. Emma Walsh bent over a holographic display showing detailed brain scans, a dark hair falling across her face as she studied the complex patterns of neural activity. She was one of only 7 people on Earth who knew the complete truth about the Devourers and what was coming. Jake had chosen each member of his secret team with extreme care, looking for individuals who possessed both the scientific skills he needed and the psychological strength to handle such terrifying knowledge. Emma had been the hardest person to convince. As the leading xenoneurologist at Mars Colonial University, she had built her career on careful, methodical research. The idea that an ancient alien consciousness could share thoughts with a human being had challenged everything she believed about how brains worked, but the evidence was impossible to ignore. "Jake, you need to see these latest results," Emma said, her voice carrying both excitement and concern. "The changes in your brain patterns are accelerating." Jake walked over to examine the scans that Emma had been studying. The images showed his brain in cross-section, with different colors representing various types of neural activity. Even to his untrained eye, he could see that something dramatic was happening inside his head. "Your synaptic flexibility has increased by 40% since your first contact with Lyra," Emma continued, pointing to specific areas of the scan. "These new neural pathways that have formed are unlike anything I have ever seen in human neurology." "What does that mean for me?" Jake asked, though he was not entirely sure he wanted to know the answer. Emma pulled up comparison scans from other humans for reference. "Look at these patterns here and here," she said, highlighting different sections. "Most intelligent species develop very rigid neural pathways as they evolve and mature. This rigidity makes their thinking efficient and predictable, but it also limits their ability to adapt to completely new situations." Jake studied the scans, beginning to understand what Emma was showing him. His brain looked nothing like the comparison images, where other humans showed neat, organized patterns of neural activity. His brain displayed what looked like controlled chaos. "But humans have retained something that most species lose," Emma continued. "We kept this mental flexibility that allows us to adapt and learn new concepts very quickly. Your brain has taken this natural human trait and expanded it far beyond normal limits." Jake felt a familiar stirring in the back of his mind, like a gentle awakening from deep sleep. Over the past 3 years, his connection with Lyra had grown much stronger. What had started as brief moments of contact during her crystal awakenings had evolved into an almost constant low-level awareness of her presence in his thoughts. "She is waking up again," Jake said, closing his eyes to focus on the alien consciousness that was blooming in his mind. Lyra's mental voice was much clearer now than it had been during those first encounters. "Your friend Dr. Walsh speaks the truth, Jake Harrison. This mental adaptability is exactly why I believe your species might succeed where so many others have failed." Emma had grown accustomed to these 3-way conversations over the past year. She pulled up a chair and settled in to listen, knowing that every interaction with Lyra provided valuable intelligence about the threat they were facing. The Devourers have consumed thousands of civilizations across millions of years. Lyra continued, her thoughts flowing easily through Jake's mind to reach Emma as well. But every single one of those civilizations followed very similar patterns of development, defense strategies, and eventual defeat. What kind of patterns? Emma asked, speaking aloud since she knew Lyra could hear her through Jake's enhanced neural connection.
Logical patterns. Efficient patterns.
When faced with the Devourer threat, most species would analyze the situation, calculate the optimal response, and implement perfectly organized defense strategies. They would build the strongest possible shields, design the most effective weapons, and coordinate their military forces with mathematical precision. Jake opened his eyes and looked at Emma. Let me guess, it never worked. Never, Lyra confirmed sadly. The Devourers have been fighting and consuming civilizations for so long that they understand every possible logical response to their attacks. They can predict exactly how a rational species will react to their presence, and they plan accordingly. Emma frowned, her scientific mind working through the implications. But humans are not always rational, exactly. Lyra's mental voice carried what Jake could only describe as excitement. Your species does something that no other intelligent race has ever done consistently. You think in ways that make no logical sense. You make decisions based on emotions, rather than cold calculations. You create what I can only call beautiful chaos where other species would build perfect order. Jake walked to the laboratory window and looked out at the stars scattered across the night sky. Somewhere out there, beyond the edge of human space, ancient enemies were stirring from their long sleep between galaxies. The thought should have terrified him, but instead he felt a strange sense of anticipation. You are telling us that our greatest weakness might actually be our greatest strength, Emma said thoughtfully. Your unpredictability is something the Devourers have never encountered, Lyra agreed. They cannot predict your responses because you yourselves do not know what you will do until you do it. This quality that other species might see as a flaw could be the key to breaking a cycle of destruction that has continued for millions of years. Jake turned back to face Emma, his expression serious. There is something else, is there not, Lyra? Something you have not told us yet. A moment of silence stretched through the mental link before Lyra responded. The first scouts have already entered your galaxy, Jake Harrison. They probe the outer systems now, testing your defenses and trying to learn your patterns of behavior. They send information back to the main fleet, preparing for the full invasion that will come. Emma's face went pale. How much time do we have? Less than we hoped? Perhaps 30 of your years now, maybe fewer if they decide you represent an immediate threat to their plans. Jake felt the weight of responsibility settling heavier on his shoulders. 30 years seemed like a long time, but he knew it would pass in the blink of an eye when measured against the magnitude of the task ahead of them. How do we fight something that has destroyed thousands of other civilizations? Emma asked. Lyra's presence in Jake's mind grew stronger, more focused. By being exactly what you are, Dr. Walsh. Unpredictable, adaptive, and gloriously chaotic. But first, we must prepare your people very carefully. We must build defenses and gather allies without, causing the panic that has destroyed so many species before you. Jake nodded grimly. The real work was just beginning. Admiral Lisa Parker had seen many classified documents during her 30-year military career, but nothing had prepared her for the folder that Jake Harrison placed on her desk in the Pentagon's most secure briefing room. Sub-Level 7 was a place where the military's darkest secrets were discussed, buried so deep underground that even nuclear weapons could not reach it. The walls were lined with signal-blocking materials that prevented any electronic surveillance, and the air itself was filtered through systems that could detect the smallest traces of foreign substances. The Admiral was a tall woman with silver hair pulled back in a tight bun and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. She had earned her rank through decades of brilliant tactical planning and had commanded fleets during the Titan colony wars. But as she read through Jake's report, her usually steady hands began to tremble slightly. You're telling me she said slowly, setting down the papers and looking directly at Jake. That an alien statue warned you about galaxy-consuming monsters, and you have been hiding this information for 5 years? Jake shifted uncomfortably in his chair. He had known this conversation would be difficult. Seeing the Admiral's reaction made him realize just how insane his story must sound to someone hearing it for the first time. We had to be extremely careful about who we told, he explained. Lyra warned us that every species that learned about the Devourers too early either fell into complete despair or destroyed. Dr. Emma Walsh, who had accompanied Jake to this crucial meeting, leaned forward and activated the holographic display unit built into the conference table. 3-dimensional images began floating in the air between them, showing brain scans, alien artifacts, and star charts that marked the locations of hidden architect sites throughout human space. We have been very selective about recruiting individuals who can handle this truth, Emma said. We needed military strategists, scientists, engineers, and other specialists who could think beyond normal boundaries. People who would not break down when faced with impossible odds. Admiral Parker studied the holographic displays with the analytical mind that had made her one of Earth's most respected military leaders. These artifacts you claim to have found, this alien technology you say you have been studying, show me proof that any of this is real. Jake reached into his travel bag and carefully removed a crystal fragment about the size of his fist. The piece glowed with the same inner light that had first attracted him to the statue on Kepler 4b. And as soon as it touched the table's surface, the room's atmosphere seemed to change. The air itself felt charged with ancient energy. Place your hand on the crystal, Jake instructed. But Admiral, prepare yourself. What you are about to experience will challenge everything you thought you knew about humanity's place in the universe. Admiral Parker was not someone who scared easily, but something about the crystal fragment made her hesitate. She looked at Jake and Emma, saw the serious expressions on their faces, and realized that whatever was about to happen would change her life forever. Taking a deep breath, she placed her palm flat on the glowing crystal. The moment her skin made contact with the alien artifact, Lyra's consciousness flooded into her mind. Admiral Parker gasped and nearly pulled her hand away, but she forced herself to remain steady as the ancient alien's mental voice filled her thoughts. Admiral Parker. Lyra spoke directly into her mind, her voice carrying the weight of countless millennia. Your species possesses a gift that even my highly advanced people never had, where we always sought perfect solutions and flawless strategies. You humans embrace beautiful imperfection and creative chaos. The Admiral's military training kicked in, helping her maintain her composure, even as her worldview crumbled and reformed around this impossible reality. What are our chances of survival against these devourers? She asked, speaking aloud but knowing the alien could hear her thoughts. That question cannot be answered with certainty, Lyra replied honestly. You are the first species we have encountered that might face the devourers with such mental flexibility and unpredictable thinking patterns. Your natural tendency toward creative solutions may be the weapon that we architects never possessed. Over the months that followed that first meeting, Admiral Parker threw herself into building a secret network of humans who could handle the truth about what was coming. She was amazed at how many brilliant individuals were willing to join there, because once they understood the magnitude of the threat facing humanity, Colonel Ryan Mitchell became one of her most valuable recruits. The weapons specialist had been developing experimental military technology for years, but now his work took on a completely new direction. He began creating adaptive weapons systems that combined architect technology with human creative thinking. Instead of building perfect weapons that worked the same way every time, Mitchell designed systems that could change and evolve during battle, becoming more effective the longer they were used. Dr. Sarah Chen joined the team from Beijing's MOST-2 Advanced Quantum Research Facility. Her specialty was defensive systems, but like Mitchell, she had to completely rethink her approach. Instead of building rigid shields that could be analyzed and overcome by a logical enemy, Chen developed protection systems based on controlled chaos theory. Her shields would randomly shift their frequencies and patterns, making it impossible for any attacker to predict how they would behave. The real breakthrough came when Jake made A startling discovery about his connection with Lyra, the neural bonding process that had changed his brain, could be replicated in other humans. Volunteers could undergo a careful procedure that allowed them to form limited mental links with architect crystal fragments, gaining access to ancient knowledge while keeping their essentially human way of thinking. The volunteers were carefully selected from among the most psychologically stable members of their secret organization. Each person who underwent the bonding process gained incredible insights into alien technology and tactical knowledge. But they also retained the creative unpredictability that Lyra believed was humanity's greatest advantage. Dr. Michael Torres, an engineer from the Luna shipyards, became bonded with a crystal that contained information about starship construction. Within weeks, he was designing vessels that combined human innovation with architect science, creating ships that could adapt their configurations during space battles. Lieutenant Commander Jessica Wright, a tactical specialist, bonded with a fragment containing military strategy data. She began developing battle plans that intentionally included random elements and emotional decision-making processes, creating strategies that no logical enemy could predict or counter. The network grew carefully and quietly, with cells of bonded humans working on different aspects of the coming war. They established hidden research facilities on remote worlds, built secret factories that produced weapons and ships incorporating both human and architect technology, and trained a new generation of military leaders who understood both the threat they faced and the unique advantages humanity possessed. During one of their regular planning sessions, Lyra delivered news that chilled everyone in the war room. "The scouts have reached your outer colonies," she announced through Jake's neural link. "They probe your defenses and study your behavioral patterns. The main Devourer fleet will arrive within 2 years, perhaps less." Jake looked around at the faces of the carefully selected humans who now knew the truth about what was coming. Admiral Parker was coordinating with secret cells on every human world, ensuring that when the time came, humanity would be ready to fight as one unified force. Colonel Mitchell was field testing weapons that combined alien precision with human intuition, creating tools of war unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. "As ready as we will ever be," Jake replied grimly. "Time to show the Devourers what humans do when we are backed into a corner." The darkness between galaxies suddenly erupted with movement as the Devourer fleet emerged from the void like a nightmare made real. Their ships were massive beyond human comprehension, stretching across light years of space in formations that had brought terror to countless civilizations. Each vessel appeared to be part machine and part living creature, with hull surfaces that pulsed like beating hearts and weapon ports that opened and closed like hungry mouths. These were the ships that had consumed the mighty architects. Energy beings known as the Zephyrians, the crystalline collective with their cities of living light, and hundreds of other advanced species throughout galactic history. The Devourers had perfected their methods over millions of years, and they approached human space with the confidence of predators who had never known defeat. They expected to find the same pattern they had encountered so many times before. First would come the panic as the target species realized the magnitude of the threat they faced. Then desperate attempts at negotiation, followed by frantic defensive preparations that always proved inadequate. Finally, the inevitable surrender, or destruction, followed by the slow consumption of everything the species had built over thousands of years of development. But as the Devourer fleet approached the Sol system, something was clearly different. Jake Harrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, humanity's most advanced warship, watching the alien fleet approach through the main view screen. He was no longer the lonely archaeologist who had kissed a crystal statue 5 years ago. The neural bonding process had changed him profoundly, linking his consciousness not just with Lyra, but with the collective network of all the humans who had undergone similar procedures. Through his enhanced awareness, he could sense the thoughts and emotions of thousands of his fellow defenders scattered throughout the human fleet. Captain Sarah Martinez on the battleship Resilience was feeling nervous but determined. Colonel David Chen aboard the carrier Independence was running through final weapons checks while humming an old Earth song. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, now commanding the science vessel Discovery, was making last-minute adjustments to experimental shield generators that operated on principles no sane physicist would approve. "Jake!" Captain Mike Rodriguez called from the communications station. "The Devourer fleet is attempting to establish standard first contact protocols. They are broadcasting what appears to be an offer to negotiate terms of surrender," Jake felt. Lyra stirring in his mind, her ancient consciousness touching his thoughts with familiar warmth. Through their mental link, he could sense her amazement at what humanity had accomplished in such a short time. "This is how they always begin," she whispered in his thoughts. "They offer the target species a choice between quick death and slow consumption. Most civilizations choose to negotiate, hoping to find some way to survive. It never works." "Ignore their transmission," Jake ordered aloud. "Lisa, are your people ready?" Admiral Parker's voice crackled over the communication system from her. "Flagship, the massive Dreadnought Terrace shield. All units report ready for battle.
Ow.
Ryan's adaptive weapons are loaded and primed. Sarah's Chaos shields are online and operating within acceptable parameters. Michael's boarding teams are standing by for assault operations." What the Devourers found waiting for them around Earth was unlike anything they had encountered in there. Millions of years of galactic conquest. The human fleet that had assembled to meet them violated every principle of military organization and tactical doctrine that logical species followed. Instead of organizing their ships into neat formations that could be easily analyzed and countered, human fleet was scattered throughout the solar system in what appeared to be random positions. Some vessels hung motionless in space near Jupiter, while others moved in unpredictable patterns around Mars. A group of smaller ships actually appeared to be playing some kind of game near the asteroid belt, chasing each other in spirals that made no strategic sense. The Devourer hive mind reached out with its collective intelligence, attempting to analyze human defensive patterns and predict their likely responses to attack. What they found instead broke their ability to calculate and plan. Every human ship in the fleet operated according to completely different tactical principles. The captain of one vessel made decisions based on mathematical analysis, while the commander of another ship nearby chose his actions based purely on emotional reactions. Some ships were equipped with weapons that followed logical design principles, while others carried experimental devices that seemed to work through methods that violated known physical laws. "They are confused," Lyra whispered in Jake's mind, and he could sense her amazement. For the first time in their existence, the Devourers cannot process what they are seeing. Your tactical randomness is beyond their ability to understand or predict. The battle that followed would be remembered throughout galactic history as the day that chaos defeated order. When the Devourers launched their first attack wave, expecting to face desperate defensive measures, they instead encountered something completely unexpected. The human fleet did not just defend against the assault. They launched immediate counterattacks that followed no recognizable strategic pattern. Ships that should have been destroyed by overwhelming firepower somehow survived through impossible maneuvers. Weapons that should not have been able to penetrate Devourer armor cut through their defenses like paper, Colonel. Ryan Mitchell's adaptive weapon systems began learning from each exchange, becoming more effective with every shot fired. His chaos bombs, designed to create random disruptions in enemy systems, spread confusion throughout the Devourer formations as their own biotechnology turned against them. Dr. Sarah Chen's impossible shield generators did not just deflect incoming energy attacks. They absorbed the power and redirected it back at the attackers in ways that human science could not explain, but somehow it's worked perfectly. But the real turning point came when Jake made the decision that would save humanity and change the galaxy forever. As the battle raged around Earth, he realized that their only hope of complete victory lay in doing something no species had ever attempted before. "Lyra," he said through their mental connection, "I need you to help me link directly with the Devourer hive mind." "Jake, that would be suicide," she protested. "The connection would destroy your individual consciousness." "Maybe," Jake replied calmly. "But it might also give us the weapon we need to end this threat forever." With Lyra's reluctant help, Jake opened his enhanced human mind fully to the collective consciousness of the Architect Network. Then, in an act of incredible courage and sacrifice, he reached out across space and forced a direct mental connection with the devourer hive mind. The ancient parasites had evolved over millions of years to process and consume the ordered thoughts of logical civilizations. But when Jake's consciousness touched theirs, they suddenly found themselves trying to comprehend something completely alien to their experience. Pure human creativity flooded into their collective awareness, emotions they had never encountered, overwhelmed their logical processes. Tactical decisions that made no sense but somehow worked perfectly shattered their understanding of how warfare should function. The chaotic beauty of human art, music, and literature crashed through their minds like a tidal wave of impossible concepts. The devourer hive mind, which had functioned as a single unified intelligence for millions of years, began to fragment under the assault of human logic. Their bioships turned on each other as different portions of their collective consciousness tried to process contradictory human thoughts. Some vessels fled toward the edge of the solar system, while others simply stopped functioning as their crews struggled to understand concepts like love, humor, and hope. Jake Harrison died in that moment, his individual consciousness scattered across the cosmos as he completed his ultimate sacrifice. But his death accomplished something that had never been achieved in galactic history. The cycle of destruction that had consumed countless civilizations for millions of years was finally broken. The surviving devourers fled back to the dark spaces between galaxies, their hive mind shattered and their confidence destroyed. Behind them, they left a galaxy where humanity now stood as guardians, ready to protect future civilizations with their perfectly imperfect nature.